Championship. Let's welcome our worthy host, TJ and Admirable.
That's us. My name's TJ and that's Admirable. One thing that match means for us with Doc Pone's win is that we're guaranteed to have a player from the Americas in the World Championship.
Yeah, it also means that we'll have to wait till next season to see if a former world champion can get back to the World Championships and maybe win a second one.
Yeah.
What a match between those two, a slugfest back and forth. But after today, after this next match, and when all are finished, we'll have our top four and see who's actually going to the World Championship.
Yeah, Doc Pone was worried that he wasn't that confident in his decks, but he's got to be confident now that he knocked the world champion out of the tournament. But looking forward to the next match. That's going to be SamuelTsao versus Greensheep. This is going to be another opportunity for Europe to put another player into that top 8. Aaron will give me the scoop on this one.
Well, Greensheep been to the World Championships before. He was there in 2014 and since was a little bit quiet. He had some great success in DreamHack tournaments in 2015, but outside of that, just missing the mark on last call for Europe. It was a really tough year for him to get that point, and now he's here again. He wants to get back to the World Championships. He won't be playing Noggin, Fog, or Zoo to get it done, but I got to respect somebody whose main goal is win championships.
Yeah, and he had a quick series to end the day yesterday. SamuelTsao sort of had the opposite, 2-4-3s. Let's go ahead and get into the match. The first player, hailing from Taiwan, please welcome to the stage, it's SamuelTsao. And his opponent from the United Kingdom, indigenous to the aggro decks, it's the Greensheep.
It's go time! SamuelTsao versus Greensheep.
Never heard of this name SamuelTsao before, so I couldn't do really any background research. I predicted that maybe Omega Zero would beat SamuelTsao and Tare would also beat SamuelTsao, so I wasn't really predicting I'd play against SamuelTsao. This is probably his major breakout tournament.
我的下一场对手是 Greensheep。
Greensheep brought the aggro deck in the HTC Europe playoff, and this interested me. I did the same strategy in the APAC playoff, so in a way, he's my teacher.
From what I looked at in my preparation, I saw that I should be favored, but maybe I underestimate SamuelTsao a little, but I definitely won't underestimate him when I'm playing against him.
SamuelTsao versus Greensheep. Let's see what you got.
Greetings from the desk and welcome everybody to another match here for the quarterfinal berths. You have Greensheep versus SamuelTsao. The winner goes to the top 8. And we'll see who's able to get ahead of him. My name is Fodan. I'm joined by Brian Kibler, and we're going to bring you guys this great best of 7. I'm still kind of reeling from the previous match here. I think everyone kind of needs to take a little bit of breather, but the action doesn't stop.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was an incredible match between Doc Pone and Pavel, and just keeps coming here as these two players, one of whom is very experienced, much like Pavel, not quite as experienced as Pavel in Greensheep, but taking on another relative newcomer in SamuelTsao, and Greensheep once again taking a sort of unusual approach, banning a deck other than Pirate Warrior. Greensheep is actually one of the players who is banning unusually compared to the rest of the field, the other being Tare in this tournament, choosing to ban Dragon Priest. I think a big part of that is that so much of his lineup itself is aggressive, and those sort of decks tend to be much more vulnerable to Dragon Priest.
Yeah, certainly. And you also combine with the fact that Pirate Warrior still does have some bad matchups. One of them is an Aggro Shaman. And because Aggro Shaman's not really popular anymore, it has a lot of weaker matchups across the board. One matchup it still remains very good against happens to be Pirate Warrior. So with that, and I know a few Rogue players say that they don't mind playing the Pirate Warrior. I personally think it's a weak matchup, but we'll see what happens. Game number 1 is a Shaman versus Shaman, but we'll see if Greensheep's aggressive strategies will pay off. He is a self-proclaimed aggro lover, loves to just put it out there, and he's usually bringing aggressive lineups, and this tournament's no different.
Yeah, and look at the difference between these two hands. Greensheep with the aggro shaman, even Hammer of Twilight. This is a card that he's playing 2 copies of, anticipating a significant amount of weapon removal from opposing decks that are planning to beat Pirate Warrior, though we haven't actually seen a ton of weapon removal in this tournament simply because so many people are banning Pirate Warrior.
Yeah, Pirate Warrior's been banned almost in every single matchup. The only time it hasn't been banned on both sides was one last night when we saw some really fast action between Greensheep. But another is when people are just banning mages. You know, we've been seeing people choose that as the second most commonly banned class. Greensheep's going to start things off very fast with an Argent Squire, which has been replacing the Pirate package. Aggro Shaman has taken a big step back with Spirit Claws and Small Time Buccaneer being nerfed. And now they've put in cards like Argent Squire and Hammer of Twilight.
It's interesting. The Aggro Shaman is probably the single archetype that has received the most nerfs sort of in recent memory. The Rockbiter weapon, Spirit Claws, and the Small Time Buccaneer, all fairly important elements of the deck that was so feared for a very long time. Now, still powerful enough that Greensheep is choosing to bring it here. So, looks like this may have been pretty accurate choices of cards for Blizzard to change.
And not really much for SamuelTsao to do. You bring up a really interesting point that, you know, Aggro Shaman seems to be targeted in most of the nerfs. You know, I believe if you look at the old Face Hunter builds from 2014, I think every single card has been nerfed to a certain degree or rotated out of standard, obviously because it's been a long time, but just funny to think about Leopard
Just like
Abusive Sergeant.
Wolf Rider stands alone.
All right, well, Greensheep has the Flame Wreath Faceless, but SamuelTsao does have a follow-up answer. This is one of the ways you can just run away with games. Sometimes the Aggro Shaman just has an uncontested 7/7 hitting the face, but that's not going to be the case this game.
And what we're seeing a lot of in this game is some of the power of the mid-range Shaman, with the Totem Golem actually having a superior minion to the aggressive deck in the early turns, and now with that Hex just absolutely outclassing Greensheep's early game. And Greensheep is going to fall behind thanks to the Overload as well.
That's right. You know, he coined this out, so he only has available 2 mana next turn. Doesn't seem like anything good outside that Argent Squire and Maelstrom Portal so far developing for Greensheep. SamuelTsao, I think he's trying to plot out how he wants to utilize his mana over the next couple turns after his Hex, because his turn 5 is also off curve. He does have the ability to Hero Power and Thing from Below on turn 5, but he hovered over very briefly the Thing from Below. Do you think he's actually considering that?
It would be a very surprising play to me. A number of things to consider this turn, even if you're not going to play for Thing from Below, even if you're planning on playing Hex, is what do you want to Hex? Or when do you want to attack with your Hex, rather? So we see that he actually chooses to knock off the Divine Shield. This does make him marginally weaker to a possible Flame Tongue Totem because there are 2 minions up, but it does mean that he's able to potentially clear the Argent Squire if he were to draw something like a Maelstrom Portal, for instance. And now with his 2-mana turn, Greensheep has very little that he can actually do. Only a single point of power in play, and his only options are not at all attractive.
Yeah, they both kind of do the same thing, right? Maelstrom Portal and Argent Squire set a 1-mana minion on board with relatively low power. At the same time, you know, these cards are still kind of rotting in your hand. Like, when do you even get out Argent Squire? The nice thing about 1-mana cards is that you can squeeze them into almost any play efficiently as time goes on. They also lose a lot of significance. You know, Greensheep chooses to attack face here, kind of leaving up his opponent's board so that he can Flame Tongue. But I think that's not the least of his concern. I think he's worried about some of these really powerful swings that are available to SamuelTsao. Remember, he has access to Lightning Storm, a big opportunity to cement the board with big taunts with Thing from Below. And if the game goes long enough, SamuelTsao has access to heals, which he doesn't even need right now because of how slow everything's gone.
Yeah, this is absolutely the way that SamuelTsao wants to play this game. You know, both players hero powering or SamuelTsao just at least being a little bit ahead. He's able to even take out some of the totems here from Greensheep. I do like just the hero power into Thing from Below here. He does have the threat of maybe getting his Thing from Below killed by a Jade Lightning plus the attack from the Argent Squire. But it still just is such an efficient use of his turn here that I wouldn't be surprised to see that be his choice.
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of be aware of what your opponent wants to do on the following turn as well. Turn 5 is usually Azure Drake or Hammer of Twilight, and your opponent starts pushing damage, maybe even up a follow-up Flaming Faceless. And you know, Thing from Below just kind of gives you a little bit of extra range. This would be the most vulnerable to Hammer of Twilight, but at least it costs your entire turn, your opponent's turn, and then you can develop behind it.
And here, you know, Greensheep does have answers. He has Lava Burst. He can clear off the 5/5. But again, he is the aggressive deck. He is the one who needs to be putting the pressure on SamuelTsao, and he still has less power in play. He still has just an Argent Squire for threats, and he needs to find an opportunity to actually generate some sort of board here.
Yeah.
It will be Maelstrom Portal to start things off.
Weasel Tunneler. Now, you know, I do hear what you're saying. You know, Greensheep is the aggressive deck. He's the one who has to, you know, get ahead of his opponent and start killing SamuelTsao. But I think that moment might also be passing at this point. I've seen aggro shamans just play value. You know, they've used Hammer of Twilight to control state of the board, try to get one minion to stick, like Flaming Faceless or even an Azure Drake, and they can still punch for a lot of damage. They still have Eye of Blackpaw. They still have the ability to use Sir Finley Murgleton to dig for extra cards. And I've seen some people punt. You know, they say, you know what, instead of playing all-out aggressive strategy, kill them by turn 6, turn 7, I'm going to just kind of play board control and play very, very, very resource-intensive. And the advantage is that you get to swarm the board a little bit better.
Yeah, the issue with trying to play a board control game against mid-range Shaman is that Greensheep is already behind in the board and has very few ways to catch up. He only has 2 copies of Maelstrom Portal for area effect cards. He does not have Lightning Storm in his deck. So if he falls behind a board of even a middling number of Jades, it can be very difficult for him to get that board back.
Yeah, no arguments here. It's going to be extremely difficult when cards like Jade Chieftain get mega value, assuming SamuelTsao doesn't pick up a better board. In fact, he might be in a position to start leveraging Flame Tongue Tome to not only clear it efficiently, but also push damage, depending on what he draws. And Greensheep's trying to find the good opportune time to draw Flame Wreath, but it's just, this is such a weak board. Your opponent has a spell damage totem, has 5 power on the board, with minions that can trade up really easily if they have Flame Tongue. So this is, again, a bad situation for Friendly Faceless. Greensheep doesn't have many options, though, because he's limited by his Overload.
Yeah, only 4 mana available this turn. The Flame Wreath, I think, has to feel like his best option because, yes, it's vulnerable to a Flame Tongue Totem. Yes, it's vulnerable to a Jade Lightning, but he doesn't really have opportunities to play this in the future that it's not going to be any less vulnerable if he doesn't get it down now. So he's falling behind on the board, needs to kind of take a sort of desperation moment to try and get back on it. And unfortunately for him, SamuelTsao does have the answer. Ooh, Maelstrom for 3 even. He can actually clear. It's not quite clean. He could use his Flame Tongue along with the Totem Golem and his Totem just to clear off the 7/7 and retain his entire board.
Yeah, and there you go. Being able to trade pretty much the same amount of mana. Your opponent lost a little bit more Overload. And while we will preserve a board, this is starting to get a little bit out of control. I think Greensheep needs to pick up a weapon, and I think that Hammer of Twilight is starting to piece things together. Because now Greensheep can start fighting for value. One thing that we don't really talk about is Hammer of Twilight can do a lot of stuff and get work done through just removing minions, and because it generates a 4/2, which can push damage or even make good value trades, since that usually is a sweet spot for most Shaman cards.
Yeah, Hammer of Twilight is very powerful in games that end up revolving around the board and value. You do get a ability to clear off a Flame Tongue Totem, an Azure Drake, and generate a minion for yourself. So it's a little bit slower than the traditional Doom Hammer in terms of the damage it might be able to generate, but it does have the ability to work similarly in terms of clearing out the board and getting you some value.
Yeah, the big problem is Overload. If he plays Hammer of Twilight, he's almost accepting that his opponent will have 6 power on the board. And Greensheep might be feeling like he has to get something more, so that way he can use Hammer of Twilight to start swinging with the next turn. So he has Argent Horse Rider and Lava Burst. And you know, after evaluating, I tend to agree here. I think he needs to go a little bit wider and try to see if he can utilize Hammer of Twilight in a better spot.
This does open up a nice pairing of Argent Horse Rider plus Hammer of Twilight for the next turn as well, which can allow him to have essentially multiple charge effects that can kill things on SamuelTsao's side of the board.
Well, I mean, SamuelTsao's pretty much got everything he wants. He's got AoE, he's got heal, he's got big board presence, he's got taunts.
Yeah.
He's even got you know, form of card draw through Pillars Down, so he pretty much has anything he feels like is the biggest priority right now.
Yeah, he's in a great position here in this game. And it's pretty crucial, as SamuelTsao is actually the last remaining representative of the Asia-Pacific region. Greensheep, kind of the opposite boat. Greensheep is potentially the 3rd European player to move on to the quarterfinals with a win here.
Yeah, that's right. Something that we didn't actually bring up too much was the fact that, or today at least, was that Europe had all 4 candidates available to go through to the World Championship. Not going to be the case. But still a really interesting idea to think about. SamuelTsao choosing to play Jade Chief and just going for the biggest board possible. And it is a lot of damage. Your opponent has to deal with it immediately, or they might be in threat of dying straight up to Bloodlust.
Yeah, there is still that Horse Rider plus Hammer of Twilight available for Greensheep if he wants it, but no clean kill on the Jade Chieftain unless he decides to use his Lava Burst, but then that really messes up the rest of his potential options here.
Yeah, I think you got to accept a little bit of damage. The good thing is that if your opponent doesn't have Bloodlust, Jade Shaman is not exactly the burstiest of decks, does have their own form of damage through Jade Lightnings and Lightning Bolts that they have in their deck. But we know SamuelTsao does not. He does have a portal, though, and this portal can be very devastating because you can, I mean, it's the fact that you're just disarming any kind of board. So Greensheep's entire comeback plan is oriented around leveraging his weapon and his health resource to outvalue SamuelTsao, but that's not what's happening here. SamuelTsao is able to clear it and then some.
Healing Totem, not a particularly impactful result here. There's not really a totem that he's especially excited for. The best would probably be Stoneclaw to protect his minions from the Hammer of Twilight if he does clear things off with the Maelstrom Portal.
Yeah, it might be worth thinking about how he actually wants to trade, if he wants to send in the Trog or the Jade Spirit. And it looks like he's just trying to take some value trades, get as much value out of the Healing Totem, because it's clear that Greensheep's playing very board-centric.
Interesting. He's choosing to just use his attacks here rather than the Maelstrom Portal and just preserving his own health. I wonder why this is. He does get the value from the Healing Totem there, and but you know, ended up missing a lot of damage if we were to just press Greensheep. That said, as we mentioned earlier, Greensheep does not have access to powerful AoE. He only has Maelstrom Portals, so there's no threat of a Lightning Storm coming down and sweeping this whole board away.
And Greensheep stuck with way too many weapons and doesn't look like he has an easy way out of this game and scenario. Speaking of being out, we talked about Pavel and what it meant for him being eliminated in the previous series. If you missed it, he dropped a nail biter to Doc Pone, score of 4-3 in favor of the Canadian, which means that all 4 winners of each respective regional playoffs has been eliminated. Pavel of Europe, B77 of Asia Pacific, Dr. Jinkaniki of America, and Omega Zero of China.
That's true.
Pretty fascinating, but at the same time, people already know it's so difficult. Just because you win the playoffs doesn't mean you're guaranteed a top 4 here in this championship. Good old Lepergnome. He's the aggro shaman now. He's going to be able to punch for damage soon.
One of those eternally nerfed cards from the old Phase Hunter decks. And yeah, now SamuelTsao just developing not only a wide and powerful board, but taunts here with the thing from below and protecting himself from any incoming damage. And he's still at 30 life. And Greensheep's built himself an armory there. He's got 2 hands and 3 weapons. Not going to work.
Yeah, and you only can hold one of them at a time. So even if he has 2 hands,
Gotta
only can swing once per turn. Unless you have Doomhammer. Boy, what Greensheep would pay for like a Blade Flurry right now at this point. Even then, might be too expensive if you wanted to use it with Hammer of Twilight. He's taking 5 damage preemptively just so he can summon a Jade Claws and get value off of it.
Does not feel good.
And SamuelTsao has to answer again. It just felt like mid-range Shaman really flexing its muscles on why it's considered pretty good in this matchup. People in the Karazhan meta especially, back when aggro Shaman and mid-range Shaman were the 2 dominant decks in recent times, mid-range Shaman was specifically teched to beat aggro Shaman. And then, of course, as the Karazhan developed, mid-range Shaman just took over completely and became the best deck.
I mean, here SamuelTsao could even just Lightning Storm, attack face for 10, and he just has lethal damage represented on board next turn. And looks like that's exactly what he's going for. Just going to send in the gnomes and the totems. I guess none of those totems can attack, so.
I like it. Samuel's proven that he's a pretty meticulous player, that he doesn't want to rush decisions, and even if it's fairly obvious what he needs to do, he's going to take his time and just make sure it's the right play. And he's going to take game number 1 with his mid-range Jade Shaman, checking it off the list.
Yeah, and he was involved in several of our most contentious series yesterday. He had the 3-hour match that we saw. Clearly a player who is taking his time and trying to ensure he's making the right plays.
All right, well, Greensheep can still strike back. I think mid-range Jade Shaman is one of the better decks against most of the lineup. You look at Druid, you look at Tempo Mage, and of course, if you ban the Pirate Warrior. But he actually left the Pirate Warrior open, which is certainly interesting. And I'm sure SamuelTsao was really happy to get that first win. We'll take a deeper look at Samuel as we get ready for game number 2.
Well met.
大家好，我是 SamuelTsao。
I'm SamuelTsao. I'm coming from Chinese Taipei, and I'm 19 years old. When I'm not studying, I'll play Hearthstone all day long. But on school days, studying is my first priority. My favorite food is a bowl of traditional Taiwanese beef noodles. I'm a Christian, so I always pray before tournaments. It brings me peace.
Samuel, very calm and collected person. I feel like the state of his composure hasn't changed much at all. I haven't seen him smile. I haven't seen him sad. I haven't seen him angry. I haven't seen him even really clench his teeth in bitterness whenever your opponent gets really lucky.
I think there's maybe one moment toward the end of his match with Omega Zero when he looked like he was a bit stressed. But he is here absolutely. He's an absolutely humble guy. One of the incredible things, we had a chance to talk to him, and he was saying that he felt fortunate to be here. We heard in the intro that he felt like Greensheep was kind of a teacher of his because he had inspired the decks that he chose to bring to the playoffs himself. And he kept saying that all these other players are so much more experienced, and he feels like he has a lot to learn from them. Well, he seems to have learned quite a bit as he's doing very well so far in this event.
True that. Now let's turn our attention to this Menagerie Rogue. Now the reason why we call it that and not the Water Rogue is because it has largely evolved away from the curated package. You look at cards like the Stranglethorn Tiger and all the Beast, Dragon, Murloc synergy. It doesn't really fit anymore. The deck has largely gone way more aggressive. And SamuelTsao throws away Curator, draws it first turn, and we've all been there.
And one of the cool things about SamuelTsao's deck here is that Silent Knight in his hand. We've seen that card showing up in a number of matches. Yulsik was also playing it. He's playing 2 copies of Shadow Sensei. And Silent Knight and Shadow Sensei were probably 2 cards that when people saw them revealed, when they were spoiled, were like, oh, these are just not cards anyone's ever going to play. Here they are, just about to make it to the quarterfinals of the Winter Championship if SamuelTsao can pull in a couple more games.
Yeah, either of these players. Greensheep has an aggressive version of the Water Rogue, too, with Shadow Sensei. We'll see if it ends up being an impact. Now, I do want to point out that SamuelTsao does weigh if he wants to play the Swashbuckler or not. I mean, pulling the patches is certainly very valuable, but also setting up the dagger is really nice. Is that I tend to start thinking that more and more that this rogue is a little bit vulnerable to some of those aggressive strategiys. Greensheep had a pretty rough opening hand. He drew all spells and Eye of Blackpaw, so it's very fortunate for him that his Shaman opponent didn't really start off fast. But assuming they do, it can be really tricky. You don't really have access to as many swing turns as a Miracle Rogue does. You don't really run things like as counterfeit coin or preparation. You're just trying to be as aggressive and play on curve as possible.
Your big swings really revolve around this guy, Finja. Finja is by far the strongest card in this deck in terms of the ability to generate board swings. And this is a huge reason I think that SamTsao chose not to coin out, say, Shaku or Silent Knight the previous turn, because he wants to save the coin to play Finja on turn 4 to get that Murloc package rolling as soon as he can.
Yep. So Greensheep finally gets some semblance of aggression here, finally on turn 3. And SamuelTsao's had a lot of time to set this up. Shaku the Collector leads into a Finja.
Trying to debate back and forth whether he wants to play the Shaku or the Silent Knight. The Silent Knight is a little bit more resilient, attacking into a Feral Spirit, but Shaku can generate a little bit of card advantage, stealing a card from Greensheep's class.
Yeah, and the one thing that I like about Shaku is that it might even enhance your hand even further. One of the really funny things, and I guess depends on how you interpret it, but one of the really interesting things about Hearthstone is a lot of times the best cards against a class might be their own class cards. You look at Hunter, when they played Secrets, you can flare. You look at Shaman, AoE, like Maelstrom Portal and Lightning Storm are really good against this kind of board.
And speaking of AoE, Greensheep firing off that Maelstrom Portal just wants to get rid of the Divine Shield on the Silent Knight and ensure that it's not going to get a free trade here. And now, it's interesting, SamuelTsao chose to use his dagger. on his turn 2 to hit that Stoneclaw Totem for 1, and it doesn't look like he's going to end up hitting it again with the dagger, so he may have kind of used that dagger swing and had it not pay off. There's a healing totem too, so yeah, that dagger swing is going to have been ultimately wasted for Samuel and may cost him more mana in the future.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily as big of a concern. I think he was probably set up for, like, if you want a Swashbuckler to get patches out and potentially use other cards to combo that. The big thing is whether or not Greensheep is ready for this Finja, because SamuelTsao has got reinforcements with Bluegill Warrior, which means Murloc War Leader is guaranteed to be pulled.
Yeah, this is going to be a massive turn for SamuelTsao. He can use his hero power, attack into one of the Feral Spirits, attack it with Finja. He's guaranteed to get at least one War Leader. Then Bluegill is guaranteed to be buffed, can kill another one of the Feral Spirits. And if he gets a War Leader and a Bluegill, well, things can just get crazy. Yeah, he doesn't even have to use the hero power because the Swashbuckler can pull the patches as well.
Yeah, and it is 1 mana, which I think in this case does matter. Your opponent's overloaded. Your opponent went really wide on the board, so using Eviscerate in this position I think would be pretty advisable. Fireguard Destroyer,
not bad. It's not great here.
It's not.
But it's a sizable body that can be impactful if the game does tend to board an attrition game. But that's kind of what Curator's for. So gets the split. That means he has access to Bluegill Eviscerate if he wants to.
I think you want to get as much Murloc value as you can before Finja inevitably dies. You know that your opponent's going to remove Finja and the War Leader as the highest priorities. You're kind of banking on the fact that it'll die. So get the Charger out and threaten your opponent.
Yeah, this turn is basically why people play this deck, why people play the Murloc version of Rogue, because you can do that and completely wipe out 4 minions from your opponent in a single turn and develop a huge board yourself.
You know, people made comparisons of Finja, the Flying Star, to Mysterious Challenger back in the Secret Paladin days, as I collectively trigger half the Hearthstone player base. You know, Secret Paladin a year ago, prior to Standard even being introduced, was extremely dominant along with Druid, Combo Druid. And part of the reason why it was so good was because it drew so many cards from your deck and put it into play directly. And by doing so, you make your deck really efficient, but you also create so much tempo on your side that it almost feels like you have full freedom to take control of the board, and your opponent is always behind.
And speaking of always behind, look at how many resources Greensheep had to spend to deal with that Finja. He now played a turn that was completely reactive. SamuelTsao is able to wipe these out, develop 6 mana worth of minions on his own, and he got Curator to follow this up. He's very high in life still and very far ahead.
Yeah, and because of the way card generation works with this deck too, in a very interesting way, you can also just play it as a straight-up mid-range deck, just get a little bit ahead on the board, always be developing and pushing a little damage, and sooner or later you find yourself with an ability to close the game. That's the first Jade being played from Greensheep. Very weak impact.
To be fair, it's hardly a Jade deck he's playing. It's more of a deck with the claws, the blanking on it. Jade Lightnings, that's what it is. Jade Lightning. See that card played so many times, it's literally in Greensheep's hand.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes the Jades aren't that impactful, but just to go to show you that how weak his development has been so far, forced to play his first Jade, and SamuelTsao can pick it apart in several ways. Doesn't have to even Curator. But Curator does protect his Shaku, which he might be able to start playing just a long value game. If he wants to instead wait to see what he draws with the card first and evaluate. That
Lightning Bolt is very strong here. He can clear off the Aya if he wants right now.
And trade in with a 2/2. Pretty easy no matter what.
And this gives him a great window to play that Fireguard Destroyer. It will overload him a second time, which will turn off the access to Curator next turn. But SamuelTsao has quite a few options to follow things up. Gets a 5-guard Destroyer, not the best, not the worst.
And look at this, he's just starting to get aggressive. Doesn't even need to get stealth synergy anymore because how far ahead he is. And Greensheep, again, gonna have to figure out a way to get back on the board.
Yeah, he needs spell power, I think, from the hero power in order to be able to get a Maelstrom Portal that can clear with his Jade Lightning. Does not find it. So he could Lava Burst Maelstrom Portal, which would get rid of the 5/6 and at least take the Divine Shield off. But this is a really, really bad spot for Greensheep.
And not to mention Shaku collects yet another card, and it's clear that your opponent's, even if you're able to clear the board, your opponent's playing very value-oriented, even playing the Shaman card.
Angry Chicken.
Else. Oh boy, we're back in it. Angry Chicken to fight back. Just a lowly chicken and a Trog has to fight off this golden legendary collection.
Well, first things first. Steal a card. Ooh.
Yeah, that works.
His Jades will almost be as big as Greensheep's.
At this point, it doesn't even matter. SamuelTsao is playing this almost, as a control deck, which is pretty fascinating to me.
Well, that's one of the things that's so interesting about the Menagerie Rogue deck. It has so many ways that it can win. You can win the game simply by pressuring your opponent early and completely wiping out their rumbly bumbly.
Man, so happened that 4 cards have battle cries in his hand.
Combo.
I mean, at this point, as long as he just got any kind of minion to play, like he could have played Azure Drake this turn. He could have, re-daggered and played Van Cleave. A little bit weak, but he was in a very good position no matter what he did. And SamuelTsao has to only worry about, is there any way I can fall too far behind in health and die? He even's willing to take Trog damage. He want none of that Angry Chicken business, keeping his board alive as much as possible. And Greensheep has picked up Sir Finley.
That may be a window for him to find a way to win. Because Sir Finley could get him life tap, it could get him steady shot. His only road to victory in this game is burning SamuelTsao out. He's too far behind on the board. He's too far behind in resources. He needs to find burn to throw at the face. He's already used a lava burst though. He has a Jade Lightning in his hand. I think he needs to go digging to try to just find the burn to kill SamuelTsao.
Yeah, I think maybe the question is if he wants to hero power before, because there is a lot of value in getting more board presence when you have Flame Tongue Totem.
Even just getting spell power from from your hero power so you can Jade Lightning for additional damage. That said, if he were to Sir Finley and get a life tap or steady shot, he'd want to be able to use it this turn in order to dig further, so he might need that mana if he also wants to play the Jade Lightning this turn. He's going to go ahead and Finley first. The options, steady shot, that is one of the good ones. And yeah, Greensheep knows this is my plan.
Well, yeah, precisely. Looks like he's just going to Jade Lightning to the face.
Getcha.
This is what we're kind of talking about. There's a small little window of opportunity for maybe Greensheep to do this, and I think SamuelTsao would love 2 extra life here at the cost of the 2-1. We'll see, though. SamuelTsao could also realistically just kill Greensheep because we know Flame Tongue Totem is a card in Greensheep's hand that doesn't represent any direct damage unless SamuelTsao leaves board up.
Well, and SamuelTsao has the Rumbling Elemental in play, so he has some interesting removal options for this board, just getting triggers from the Rumbling Elemental. Looks like he's debating playing the Aya. He could also just play Curator, which would give him a big taunt up to prevent the other minions from being able to get through either.
It's also Battle Cry, so
yeah,
it synergizes
exactly.
with
it's a taunt plus 2 damage to a random target.
Best of both worlds. And, I'm kind of looking at some of the cards SamuelTsao can draw, because it draws only one of each tribe, a Beast, Murloc, and a Dragon. He has an Azure Drake, so he picks up the Stranglethorn Tiger, another Drake.
And a War Leader,
I believe. Yeah, War Leader. So that is it.
Look at Greensheep. His head is in his hands. He's closing his eyes. He doesn't want to see what's happening here.
It's a difficult moment to digest, because he's running out of time. But at the same time, he's at 24 life. If he picks up another series of bursts of back-to-back, he still can do this. That's not it, though. Totem Golem is not a good draw, and he can't even get past this Curator with Flame Tongue Totem. What he can do is potentially buy time. If he plays Totem Golem and Flame Tongue, he could try and see if SamuelTsao gets baited into trading too much and stall for even more time, giving him enough draws to win the game.
Yeah. I think that Greensheep may be wondering if he should have used the Flame Tongue before to push some damage, because he had a window where he had a totem that could have attacked the previous turn, which could have gotten 2 damage in. He wouldn't have had this Jade Golem in play, but he wouldn't have run the risk of having his offense stymied by a taunt. That said, the only taunt in SamuelTsao's deck is the Curator. So there was only a single card that could possibly really stop him from getting that minion damage in.
Yeah, precisely. Your opponent would have to get something off the Shaku or the Swashbuckler to heal or taunt. outside of that Curator.
But you'd also have to keep a minion in play over the course of those turns when your opponent is significantly ahead on board, and that can be difficult as well.
Greensheep sends it over to SamuelTsao, who's trying to piece together a push here.
How many battle cries we got? Rumbly bumbly go!
He's got 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 with the dagger, plus Leroy is 17, plus SI agent is 19, and he has 1 battle cry with that. So maximum 21, it looks like. And SamuelTsao is just removing the board, like we said, but it doesn't seem like he's dead to 1 single card. But I can definitely see 2 cards killing SamuelTsao, considering that the Hunter Hero power weaves in 2 in every single turn.
And SamuelTsao is just looking to absolutely eliminate Greensheep's board this turn and build himself a lethal attack next turn.
Man, you got to get that damage in as well. It's the big thing.
Well, he can still attack for 9 on top of this. Clear this, attack with everything, including his dagger. That puts Greensheep down to, I believe, 15 life. And with this board plus Leroy Jenkins in the hand, oh, he's actually not going to go at face with everything. He's going to clear that, but still, you have effectively infinite damage given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's not going to be good enough. 2 games in a row for SamuelTsao as he's cornering this Aggro Shaman further and further. Aggro Shaman unable to get a win. Words I never thought possible just a couple months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different world where, you know, the Aggro Shaman deck is forced to play a little bit less efficient cards, doesn't have access to patches. Greensheep is choosing to play a version that does not include any of the pirates, and a lot of the burst damage of that deck came from South Sea Deckhand plus Flame Tongue Totem and such, and you know, Greensheep has been forced to play a little bit behind in a lot of these games because he hasn't had great starts.
And you know, a lot of the starts have been inconsistent, but also SamuelTsao has had some really good draws come to his hand as well. You saw Finja being coined out there, and he even had ways to lead up into it. He had his choice of 3 drops, drawing good mid-range size cards, because there's some Shaman cards that would just be dead. You know, you don't really want to be drawing Totemic Might off of that. So, you know, things really working out for SamuelTsao in all cannons, and it seems, or on all corners, excuse me, and it looks like SamuelTsao is just 2 games away from going to the top 8 here.
And I think
what can Greensheep do?
I think that particular matchup may have been pretty important because I think the Rogue is one of SamuelTsao's decks that is the weakest to the overall aggression of Greensheep's lineup. It's a deck that can struggle to play well if you do fall behind. A lot of his other decks are much more powerful in the aggressive lineups here. And it will be, it looks like, the Mage from Greensheep playing Tempo Mage, the one of, I believe, 2 we have seen in this tournament, the other that belonged to Omega Zero. And now SamuelTsao getting to play Pirate Warrior, which is a deck that we have seen very little of, but only because it's been constantly banned.
Yeah, Pirate Warrior, despite being banned, and when people let it through, they specifically have techs and lineups against it, still has a positive win rate in the tournament. 5 games to 4 losses. So you still know that Pirate Warrior is a force to be reckoned with, even despite the odds being teched against them. Greensheep does have one of the better lineups against Pirate Warrior, though. I actually do agree with the ban. I think letting it through when you have all of these things, specifically keeping in mind how to beat Pirate Warrior, should give you chances, but you're running out of margin of error. You know, you're down 0-2. You need to get this win, otherwise you have to sweep the final deck.
Yeah, which is very difficult. Even trying to sweep the Pirate Warrior, even if all of your decks are great against Pirate Warrior. You know, we saw a number of players who, or at least one player, who went down the road of, I'm just going to beat Pirate Warrior. And I think Amnesiac said that he did the math on it. You have to win something like over 80% of the time with all of your decks in order for that to be a strategy that can consistently pay off.
And 80-20 matchups are hard to come by in Hearthstone. There's
very few of them. They are very few and far between.
All right, so SamuelTsao already introduced with, you know, a little bit of a tricky scenario. He doesn't have the best turn 1 play, and it opens himself up to a lot of removal from Greensheep, whether it's Arcane Missiles, whether it's just Coin Ping and taking it a little bit slow. And this is kind of one of the advantages of the Tempo Mage. You know, people usually say part of the reason why Patches is so effective is not only because you get it for free, but because it's really hard to remove everything super fast, and you sneak in that extra damage, and also the Pirate synergies. Tempo Mage does have a lot of those small pings, those juggles that it's able to hit those minions and control the state of the board.
And here Greensheep is trying to figure out, what does this turn 1 upgrade mean? What is SamuelTsao trying to do that he just wants a 1/3 weapon on turn 1? The things that can generally be telegraphing are the Bloodsail Raider. They're going to play on turn 2, as well as potentially South Sea Deckhand, which in fact SamuelTsao does have. And he correctly figures out that this is one of the threats here and chooses to coin out the mirror image to protect. Ooh, and SamuelTsao is punished for holding his pirate as he immediately draws Patches on turn 2.
I mean, granted, Patches was coming out this turn anyways, but you'd rather have an extra card in your deck.
Yeah.
So basically, SamuelTsao lost a card.
And Greensheep, he said in an interview earlier that Patches is his favorite and least favorite card, since it's so good when you get to pull it out of your deck for free, but makes you so mad when it's sitting in your hand. Oh my God, the perfect draw for Greensheep here as he finds a second Mana Worm to go with Arcane Missiles, and those pirates are dead.
Yeah.
The Davy Jones locker with them.
And no sign of slowing down. Mana Worm is super threatening right now. And Greensheep is really happy to see his opponent drew Patches. You mentioned those comments. Why don't you hear it from himself?
My favorite and my least favorite card is Patches, the pirate, because when you don't draw it in your opening hand, it's really great. But if you draw it in your open hand, it's really annoying, and I'm really frustrated because of that.
It's kind of the opposite when it happens to your opponent, though. All right, you drew Patches.
Is all of a sudden his favorite card again.
I love you, Patches. You were in his hand, not mine.
Well, Greensheep doesn't have anything to play this turn. Till Arcane Intellect came into the hand. Very nice draw there, just so he can, develop his hand further. And wow, if he didn't have Arcane Intellect, he'd be drawing really poorly for the next couple of turns.
Yeah, this hand for Greensheep is a little clunky, though. He only has some mid-range minions in those Azure Drakes. He did pick up a Fireball, which can take out a big minion like this Naga Corsair, but he isn't able to actually present any pressure of his own. He has done very well at containing SamuelTsao's early pressure, though, which means that he's at 29 life here moving into the mid-game, while SamuelTsao is the one who's down to just 21.
Yeah, and Greensheep even able to take a breather by taking a step back and just playing Azure Drake, accepting some damage from his opponent.
And here, SamuelTsao, look at his hand. He has 2 cards. Leroy Jenkins is great when you're pushing for a lot of damage. It's very bad when you're trying to just play a interactive mid-range style of game. And Greensheep is the one who is looking to play the longer game and is also the one at a lot higher life total. So that's a pretty poor draw for SamuelTsao this turn. He could play his Frothing Berserker and trade his Naga Corsair to try and buff up his Berserker, but that ends up being pretty awkward because if Greensheep has a single removal spell, he can kill the one big minion that he's built up. He may even just use Leroy as removal here.
Yeah, I do think that he has to start thinking about creative lines. If Leroy was used as removal, he could actually kill off those 1/1s. But then Frothing Berserker gets stranded even further. I think his potential logic is that he saw his opponent not remove the Naga Corsair. Maybe he lacks actual opportunity to do it further, and he's just going to play another minion.
And Water Elementals are great in this matchup, but they're a little bit slow right here. Greensheep, I think, is going to take the opportunity to get that Frothing off the board. That is so scary. You never want to leave a Frothing Berserker on the board for too long. And now Greensheep comfortably at 26, and SamuelTsao with just a single card. Bloodsail Raider's not bad.
Yeah, it's something.
And I could even see playing Leroy here and attacking. No, you can't really attack a Whelp because your opponent has the hero power. You'd have to be able to kill both Whelps in order for Leroy to really be a reasonable board presence play.
Yeah, when you see Water Elementals come out, though, that's going to be a really bad sign. That card is insanely effective against Pirate Warrior. And SamuelTsao just draws another Bloodsail Raider. You might even have to consider removing all the threats here. Water Elemental and Flame Waker are both potential minions that can end the game by themselves.
Yeah, being able to lock down your opponent's weapon by attacking the face with Water Elemental reduces so many of the options Pirate Warrior has available. If SamuelTsao were to, say, draw an Arcanite Reaper and this Water Elemental went uncontested, he would just absolutely be unable to use one of the strongest cards in his deck.
Yeah, and let's be clear about one thing. SamuelTsao is not winning by going all face.
No.
If he goes for 12 damage right now, he'd still even be 12 short. So it's definitely not a thing that he's thinking about right now, and he's gonna have to control the state of the board and hope that his Bloodsail Corsair or his, or some other further weapon can be found off the top of his deck in order to end the game.
Yeah, and here's the Leroy removal here. Forced to use his burst damage to clear off the Water Elemental. And now that Whelp can potentially pick off the 4-1, and even Ragnaros could come down.
Chooses to go with Barnes immediately. I think he's feeling like he'd rather just get the second Wild Elemental out and prevent any type of scenario where Arcanite Reaper can start pushing damage to the face. And I think Greensheep understands.
There's Reaper, so a powerful draw for SamuelTsao, but yeah, he recognizes it's going to be locked down for the rest of the game by that Water Elemental, and Greensheep picks up a much-needed first win in the series.
There you go. So it looks like Greensheep climbing back slowly, and Pirate Warrior falls. Now the question is, how much can Greensheep milk this? Because remember, he's leaving Pirate Warrior open deliberately because he wants to try targeting it or cornering it to a certain degree. You can't really truly hard counter Pirate Warrior, but you can certainly slow it down.
Yeah, and he has a number of other decks that are powerful in the matchup. The Aggro Shaman, as you mentioned, is generally considered to have a strong Pirate Warrior matchup. I think it's a bit worse now than it used to be, for sure. Having more expensive cards like the Hammer of Twilight, fewer easy early interaction because you don't have your own patches can make things difficult. But there's still Argent Squire and Tunnel Trog that are stronger early game minions than most of what the Pirate Warrior has.
And we mentioned that Greensheep, representing Europe, had some early dominance of the round as a continent with all 4 players advancing to Elimination Day. But after Pavel, he's looking to see if he can follow up with a good performance. We got a chance to sit down and talk about his sweep over Mega Zero and explain why him and his 3 teammates have had so much success.
So all 4 of the European players have made out groups.
Greensheep is going to close it and move on.
Pavel lives to day number 3.
Wow.
And so far, we're seeing exactly what a lot of people predicted. Europe seems to be standing on the top of it all.
I'm not surprised at all that Europe does well. I feel that Europe is the best prepared and also brings the best decks.
Of course, it was Europe that came out on top. Of course, indeed.
Every European player coming to this tournament have quite a good confidence.
And every it takes to win.
Overall, European scene has way more players. It's way harder to compete.
And since there's a lot of players, that means there are a lot of top tier players.
2 more European players to the quarterfinals.
You play against good players, meaning you'll get better yourself, your opponents will get better. It's basically an upward spiral in progression.
And of course, in Europe we have world champion.
These European players are coming out victorious.
Да, я думаю, Европа. I think Europe is one of the strongest, and it will probably show itself good in this tournament.
I think European is pretty stacked.
Hopefully I'll make it back to the World Championships and maybe even go for the World Championship title.
I think it's important to note that not just Europe is strongly represented, but also Eastern Europe. You see 2 members from Russia and 1 from Ukraine, and you can all kind of lump them together as the Russian-speaking community as well, who's also out in full force. Big shout out to them. They're some of the most active and passionate Hearthstone fans around.
I think it's also important to note that most of the caster voices who are talking about how great Europe were have English accents in that piece, so maybe a little bit biased.
I'm sure they are to a certain degree. But, you know, it's interesting they pointed out that they said that they have the most players. And I think what they mean by that is they have the most, competitive players that do tend to go into it. Because I think China has Europe covered
Absolutely. But
twice over.
I think a lot of it is Europe as a region has so many LAN events compared to a lot of other regions. For instance, North America only just started having a lot of major events that are hosted by third parties, whereas Europe, has had DreamHacks for years now. And that's really allowed a lot of the players there to cut their teeth in the competitive scene in a way that other regions haven't had be possible. But we are getting to Game 4, and Greensheep with his version of Finja Rogue. We see the stealthy Murloc already in his hand against SamuelTsao, once again trying to get the win with Pirate Warrior, and once again draws patches.
It's not what you want to see, but maybe Sir Finley Murgleton can help clean it up. Now, I know this matchup, a few people told me that they felt pretty good about the Rogue versus the Pirate Warrior, but I die a little inside whenever I queue this deck and I run to Pirate Warrior. When I was playing the Heroic Tavern Brawl, I queued into like 4 or 5 Pirate Warriors, and they were the bane of my existence. It's a really tough matchup if they just start getting onto the board early and they start hitting your face very aggressively. And, SamuelTsao has a board control type start, and that's also a possible way they can get ahead. South Sea Captain, a card very much slept on for a while until they started seeing the potential of Pirates come out. Really can do a lot of damage.
And also that Finja result, getting access to Fire Blast, the mage hero power, is very important for SamuelTsao here because it lets him interact in the early turns in a way that he normally cannot do without a weapon. And he can use this to potentially just kill this Argent Squire immediately, or he can just develop his board a little bit and still have that left over to do incremental damage to kill larger minions later on.
Yeah, the setups here, there's actually several routes you can go. You know, we're talking about taking it slow and setting up the pirates, but now they drew Frothing Berserker. He can also try to force his opponent's hand, because on turn 3, your opponent's usually trying to develop a stealth minion, and maybe you can use that opportunity of passivity to develop a very proactive play. But then you also lose the ability to save coin for either SamuelTsao Captain patches or other potential plays that might come to your hand.
Looks like he may just be going with Upgrade here, which does give him the ability to develop the patches as well. It gives him, he can attack over several turns. If he were to just use Fire Blast here, okay, he's going to go ahead and play the Raider as well. And Greensheep's going to get a little bit of good news for him, that there is no pirate being fired out of a cannon, and that means patches is in the hand.
Interesting. So he's choosing to go for, you know, the SamuelTsao Captain. Try to see if he can just get the most amount of pressure onto the board back-to-back turns, because if the Frothing Berserker gets killed, then his follow-up play is pretty weak. So it's actually a respect to Greensheep's opening hand, which he did keep a card that he saw, which was Finja.
But that Backstab is an excellent draw for Greensheep here. It enables him to clear off this entire board with Backstab, SI, and his Dagger, and that really stymies the aggression of SamuelTsao. And if he does get to the middle turns of the game where he can get that Finja going, that can be difficult for the Pirate Warriors to deal with.
Right on. And all of a sudden, SamuelTsao Captain is left all alone.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Yeah, and so SamuelTsao might have to just boot and go with his Frothing Berserker plan instead. We'll see what SamuelTsao draws. Maybe he can get Fiery War Axe or something else to help clean up that SI7 agent.
And we have heard Greensheep talk a little bit about how, you know, he's loved to play aggro decks for a long time, but for a long time he also kind of just played with reckless aggression, as the term has been used quite often recently by TJ mostly, I think. But he's slowed down a bit, and he feels like that has been a big part of his recent success. And we saw how deliberate he took that turn. Ooh, a Cold Blood. This is very good for Greensheep's mana usage this turn. Yeah, he can get a Eviscerate on the Frothing Berserker, Cold Blood on the SI, hit for 7-8 with the patches, and remove SamuelTsao's minion here.
I was laughing a little bit because Ancient Shield Bearer was like the card that you would use to stop aggro back in the Cycle Cthulhu days.
Now he just needs to get some Cthulhu cards.
He just needs to get Cthulhu cards.
I mean, look at this aggression. Pirate Warrior is known to be the aggro deck, and yet it is Greensheep who is putting SamuelTsao under such pressure here.
Yeah, and now SamuelTsao again has to go with the suboptimal play. He has to use patches just to remove, not an ability to gain tempo back on the board. And, you know, Greensheep gets full development of Finja rather safely. He's at 28 health. And SamuelTsao's almost out of cards. This is something to also consider, too.
I'm slightly surprised with how quickly Greensheep just attacked the face here with his Pirate. He could have attacked into SamuelTsao Captain, which would prevent SamuelTsao from potentially just killing it with Fire Blast or a potential just small weapon like he looks like he may do here. And now his only way to activate the Finja will require him to take face damage if SamuelTsao does use the weapon to clear the 1/1.
Well, upon further inspection, maybe Greensheep wants to keep his options open, so that way cards like Shadow Step and Defender of Argus are less dead. And yeah, he does have a Defender of Argus in his deck, so that could be a possibility, but for the most part, I do tend to agree with you. That one extra damage could end up mattering in terms of conserving your health as a resource.
And not only will it require him health, it'll require mana, because he'll have to use his hero power next turn if SamuelTsao does clear this. So
yeah,
that said, SamuelTsao is very low in life, and you know every point of damage can very much matter. Well, there is a Shadow Step.
Well, at first he needs to kill off one of the pirates with Finja.
Armorsmith. Ooh, that's pretty nice. That does give him quite a bit of life back to work with. Yeah, it's always funny when you're playing Rogue against Warrior and you have the burgle effects, specifically against Pirate Warrior. I've won so many games getting like a Public Defender or something else ridiculous.
Public Defender, which is kind of like what Doomsayers usually does: 2 mana, gain 7 health. Chooses not to play it.
Not playing the Armorsmith here. Interesting. I'm curious what the rationale behind that is.
Okay, I think he's keeping his mana open in case maybe Finja.
He could Shadow Step and re-Finja.
Yeah,
is an option.
In case he didn't pull, the ideal Murloc setup. Because then he could pull even more Murlocs.
If he trades here with the Bluegill and then Shadow Steps and plays Finja again, he has a huge Finja But he does run the risk that SamuelTsao just doesn't play a minion that he has a good trade into. Then again, if SamuelTsao is not playing minions, he probably will just die over the course of a couple of turns. Well, there's Leroy.
Yeah, but he's very far away from killing his opponent.
So he has 6-7 potentially this turn, and then he would have another 8-9 the following turn. So yeah, he is quite a bit away from being able to actually kill Greensheep here, but I think that's his best option, is to just push to try and get as much damage as he can, because playing minions is going to be a liability against that Finja.
Even if SamuelTsao drew the best card damage for one card, which I think is Heroic Strike to fit with Leroy, he'd still be a few damage points off.
I think so.
Not really finding too many ways out here. What now? And he also has to keep in mind that if he plays Leroy, he's kind of vulnerable to Finja getting a trade and even more Murlocs, or he might even just die, because his opponent has 4, 8, 9 damage at the moment.
In the tank, exactly how he wants to navigate this turn. But as you said, I don't know that there is a combination of cards. Obviously, if Greensheep attacks him for 9 next turn, he's on a 1-turn clock. The only thing he can draw to fit in with Leroy is Heroic Strike. That gives him 12 total damage that turn, and Greensheep's at 15.
Greensheep looking for extra ways to end the game, and there's no minion that comes out. So Finja's re-stealth doesn't actually end up paying off immediately, and oh, not enough mana. Not enough mana. That would have almost pushed it to the edge. And now SamuelTsao has 2 damage weapon, Leroy, and even if he drew Heroic Strike, would not be enough, so that should wrap it up. Arcane Reaper's not enough too, so SamuelTsao drops game number 4, and that's back-to-back games where Pirate Warrior has lost.
And I mean, a number of people have questioned Greensheep's decision to leave the Pirate Warrior deck up, but certainly paying off for him in this series, as he is picking up all his wins from it so far.
Yeah, and again, I think that matchup's pretty tough. So a really nice win here for Greensheep. And now he has his Aggro Shaman and his Jade Druid remaining here. Because, of course, SamuelTsao banned Greensheep's Pirate Warrior, very reasonably so. Now, Jade Druid is certainly an interesting mix here, because Greensheep brought all aggressive decks and then Jade Druid, which can play very tempo-oriented, and by all means, we've seen Greensheep uproot his Ancient of War on an empty board before, like innervating it out, trying to be aggressive. But, you know, where do you think it really fits into this big puzzle?
I think part of it is just has to do with the way that he is choosing his bans. His Jade Druid deck can give him a way to punish some of the control decks that people may have that are very strong against perhaps his other aggressive decks. So able to sneak through wins that way. Also, with the number of taunts it's capable of generating, it can be quite strong against Pirate Warrior with the right draw. I don't think it's a good matchup, but it is definitely a winnable matchup.
Okay, well, it looks like we've got confirmation that it's going to be Shaman for Greensheep. He's going to go back to that Aggro Shaman, which has cost him a few games. And SamuelTsao is going to switch to the Reno Warlock. The first time we'll be seeing it this series. And a deck that I think maybe in his mind could be the critical point. You know, if Reno Warlock can beat the aggressive deck even one time, it can escape and get that important win. Reno Jackson in the opening hand already. But if he's not able to get a win, this Reno Warlock deck is going to be very vulnerable to things like Jade Druid, so it's going to be crucial to get this victory for SamuelTsao.
Yeah, the remaining deck we have, of course, is his Pirate Warrior deck. So it is this and what is thought to be the strongest deck in the format. So SamuelTsao can't be feeling too bad, especially considering he has Reno Jackson in his opening hand. And that is one of the key components to fighting off Aggro Shaman. But look at that hand from Greensheep.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's a key component. It's not the answer. People have often simplified the matchup to having Reno and then you win. We've seen people play Reno and then die the next turn because their opponent just has a crazy board. You need a little bit more than that. That's why Doomsayer is really important. Acidic Swamp Ooze actually does help a lot. Not as much as before because of the way Small Time Buccaneer has shifted out, but still useful.
And Greensheep opening with the Tunnel Trog. There's actually the Tunnel Trog Totem Golem in his hand. There's often some debate as to whether if you coin out the Tunnel Trog or coin out the Totem Golem first, then play the Tunnel Trog after that to open up your mana in the future turns. But he does have Jade Claws in his hand, which is an argument for leaving your 3 mana or your third turn into a 2 mana play, considering you'll be overloaded.
And SamuelTsao does have an answer with the Shadow Bolt. Able to take out a little bit of that power, really crucial removal there. If he had tapped again, I would say that this game is already looking like Greensheep has a good chance to win immediately.
Now this is a bit awkward though, because the Jade Claws here will overload Greensheep the following turn, and he has the coin and would love to play one of those 5-drops in his hand. But as it stands, he's potentially going to have a very weak turn next turn if he doesn't pick something up.
Yeah, but at least his mana open enough to play the Flame Wreath Faceless, which might scare SamuelTsao enough. Then he's playing Kazakus at this point because he doesn't have anything better to do. He's going to go for a 5-mana potion.
Okay, that's a fairly weak 5-mana initial potion here. The Mystic Wool can be reasonable to potentially polymorph Flame Wreath Faceless, but Resummon right now is not getting anything from SamuelTsao. He has no dead minions so far.
Yeah, and Mystic Wool doesn't even work the way you want it to, ideally with
the
AoE.
for instance, yeah.
You would transform a minion first and then do it. So he would have to get very fortunate if his opponent had the Flame Wreath Faceless. We know Greensheep doesn't, but SamuelTsao, that is his #1 fear right now.
And yep, finds Freeze here. Is probably the best option to slow down the damage and get him to the middle turns of the game. So this is not the potion that SamuelTsao was looking for. He did not concoct the juice, as TJ might say.
Kazakus Potion only gives him 2 friendly minions and 2 random enemies being frozen. Now, Greensheep doesn't actually have that much to push here, but he can use his Lightning Bolt as a way to pump the Trog, and he has the coin to help smooth the mana curve. So this is still looking like he's able to generate enough damage, enough threat to force SamuelTsao to do something.
I suspect there's a good chance we may see him swing with his weapon this turn. He chooses not to. He does have the Hammer of Twilight, so he may have wanted to get the damage in that turn if he were to Hammer of Twilight the following turn, just to maximize the usage of his mana and his weapons. But it looks like he's planning on playing Azure Drake next turn.
Yeah, you know, Azure Drake is better because you want to set up for the best board post Reno Jackson. So it does feel like that's what he's gearing towards. You know, maybe somewhere deep down inside, Greensheep is okay with his opponent oozing this and not oozing his Hammer of Twilight to get that 4 damage in, but his Hammer of Twilight's also resistant against ooze because it summons a minion.
It's true. He's actually just, if SamuelTsao were to just play, say, Mountain Giant, Greensheep would just be 2 damage off lethal, I believe, with the Lava Burst alone. Because he has the 5, 6, 7 on board, 5 from the Lava Burst, 2 more from the Overload. So if you were to pick up a Flame Tongue Totem or a Lightning Bolt, he'd just be able to win the game.
Looks like SamuelTsao leaning towards removing the weapon, playing Imp Gang Boss. Seems to be very mana efficient, not to mention that it goes wider onto the board so you can remove multiple threats if they drop.
Does get oozed though, which does prevent Greensheep from getting a couple points of damage. And Flame Wreath Faceless is a strong draw because it presents a large minion on the board, also pumps his Trog, but he is in a little bit of a pickle in terms of protecting his minions on the board otherwise, because it does give very good trades to SamuelTsao if he has something like a Siphon Soul or Blast Crystal Potion, and in fact Samuel has both waiting in his hand.
Yeah, so now, you know, Greensheep can either set up for a good board if his opponent has Reno Jackson, or he can try to threaten as much damage as possible and try to go for it.
He could, say, coin out Hammer of Twilight and use that to kill the ooze, which only seems appropriate that the ooze would die to a weapon. That does protect his Tunnel Trog and allows him to connect 5 damage this turn, leaving Samuel at 11. And you know, if Samuel were to Reno, he has a lot of damage remaining on the board, threatening the ability to kill him, and is quite strong against a single target removal spell as well.
And he does keep all of his mana crystals open too, so he had 6, but the 6 the following turn isn't that powerful. And look like he's going for the big damage, pumping the Trog with a Flame Wreath Faceless. And SamuelTsao, he's got some decisions to make here.
I think a pretty clear decision is Siphon Soul on the 7/7 and trade the ooze into the 6/3 Trog. It leaves him at 12 life, and he's able to kill the 1/1 as well. So this board is swung very strongly back to SamuelTsao, and he has Reno waiting in the hand and currently owns the board. This could be very bad for Greensheep.
Oh, Greensheep still has the Azure Drake available to him. Does seem to survive the board at first glance, but you know Reno Warlock if they have Reno Jackson, you're going to be in trouble. I think you have to just, ignore that possibility, though. I think one of the big problems is that if you're too mindful of it right now, you're just never really going to be able to threaten the opponent, and then they don't necessarily need to.
Looks like it will be a coin turn for Greensheep, debating exactly what he wants to play.
Yeah, Hammer Twilight, the thing about Hammer Twilight right now is that it's not even necessarily setting you up for anything super successful, because on turn 7, your opponent's playing cards like Abyssal Enforcer and other really big minions. Although Abyssal Enforcer is pretty weak because it damages yourself. But you have to keep in mind that your opponent's thinking about playing big cards in general. And Hammer Twilight isn't exactly a value trade immediately. In fact, I think Twilight of Hammer, or Hammer Twilight.
Twilight something Hammer, one of those.
Whatever, the weapon is not exactly going to be able to do anything besides go face. Yeah,
and that's what he does.
Because if he traded with Imp Gang Boss, he'd just be too far behind.
Yeah, and he's going to get the bad news that Reno Jackson is, in fact, in the hand for SamuelTsao.
I think he was kind of
a little bit of a nod.
This.
Yep.
And, that was his chance. That was his chance to develop board. But he set up a 2-turn lethal saying, what's the likelihood he did? He kept one card. I know he kept one card. And now he's paying the price for it.
And Greensheep finds another Flame Wreath Faceless, which is one of the ways back into this game. Looks like he's going to Azure Drake plus Maelstrom and perhaps use the Hammer to clear off quite a bit of this board here to try and claw back. Because now, the Reno's gone. He needs to establish a board presence that can get consistent damage in, because he doesn't have enough board, or rather enough damage in his hand to actually kill SamuelTsao from 30. It's just too much.
Greensheep going to Maelstrom Portal first in case the minion changes anything, looking potentially for a charge minion of some kind or a taunt. Does not find it, and the Twilight Elemental comes out to play, but should get traded to fairly easily, and SamuelTsao can now continue his rampage back. Yeah, he didn't get anything very amazing with the Kazakus potion here, but he's got a lot of options for removal. He can even life tap because of how much health he's regained.
Yeah, when your opponent is life tapping against your aggro deck, it's a really bad feeling, especially in the sort of middle turns of the game. Usually they're trying to conserve as much life as they can, but SamuelTsao has so much to work with that he's just looking to punish Greensheep even further.
Even saving Power Overwhelming here, it looks like he's trying to see if he can save some of these cards to potentially go for game-ending damage. Chooses to Soulfire, part ways with Kazakus Potion. That thing wasn't really doing much anyway.
Bad potion anyway, didn't need it.
Summoning 2 friendly minions that died, you had imps in the pool. But, here's something interesting, too. Can Greensheep fight for, temporary value game? I don't think so, because he's got Flame Wreath Faceless, but I'm looking at that Blast Crystal Potion, and I'm looking at that Mountain Giant. It's going to be kind of hard to deal with everything in a timely manner and be able to pressure your opponent because he's at 28.
When you're lava bursting minions as aggro shaman, and not because they are in the way of your minions, you are usually losing. And that was what Greensheep just had to do. It could even be Emperor Thaurissan coming down for SamuelTsao to discount a very powerful hand that includes the 20 damage combo.
So he's just a little bit off from killing his opponent in the next couple of turns. Greensheep does have an ability to set up a rather large board. Flame Tongue Totem, good trades. And then you have Flame Wreath Faceless set up, except that runs straight into the Blast Crystal Potion. And SamuelTsao's just got all the answers right now to make sure to deny the ability for Greensheep to come back into this game.
Even Demon Wrath picked up here can clear off, if he wants, pretty much the rest of the threat here. And Blast Crystal Potion, essentially no drawback at this point in the game. And yeah, SamuelTsao's not going to allow any development here, can just drop a Doomsayer. And he's still in a position where he can safely life tap if he wants to. Yeah, decides, okay, I'm going to tap last, but it doesn't matter, I'm so far ahead.
I do feel like SamuelTsao actually could have maybe even broken up pieces of the combo to copy the Face Manipulator before removing it, start putting pressure back on his opponent. But I think at this point, it largely doesn't matter. He's just so far ahead that he's able to get away with this kind of stuff. But now he kind of has some weak proactive plays. He doesn't have a Flame Wreath Faceless. He doesn't really have the ability to just play Leroy straight up right now.
It's true. He does have Jiraxis, but Jiraxis yourself down to 15 life has got to be scary when you're in a situation against a deck with so much burn, as Aggro Shaman does have. It feels like you're in such command of this match. And it looks like we just saw SamuelTsao kind of looking up in the air You know, looking to the sky, okay, what have you played so far? You played a Lava Burst, you played a Jade Lightning, what do I have to be afraid of? He decides, I'm not afraid, and it is Eridar Lord of the Burning Legion time.
He says, if you don't kill me with these 3 cards, I can kill you with the combo and Drax's attacks. Greensheep nodding his head because he got Eye of Blackpaw, so that is a lot of minion pressure, and it is going to stop SamuelTsao from ending the game from what we see, unless he picks up something else here.
There is a Fellfire Potion that the 6/6 does survive. If you were to Fellfire Potion and just Leroy Power Overwhelming and Punch, is that enough?
Oh, actually, you're right. I forgot about Fellfire Potion. Yeah, that actually might be enough.
I think that might be enough. Leroy Power Overwhelming, that's 10, 15. Yeah, he's got enough. Fellfire Potion will clear the way. Doesn't need the full combo because he has a minion on the board. And Greensheep really, really wanted to be able to get a win against this Reno Warlock deck. He's going to have to get his wins against Pirate Warrior.
Wow, having to sweep Pirate Warrior, that is a tall order. SamuelTsao goes to a 3-2 lead, 1 game away from going to the quarterfinals and potentially redeeming the Asia-Pacific region.
Yeah, Greensheep looking to live up to the accomplishments of his compatriots, already waiting in the quarterfinals, Nairi and Stanadachi. And Greensheep wants to get back to that form that brought him to the World Championship in 2014.
And there you go, you know, being able to answer all of the Aggro Shaman's threats. Now, the big story of the series is actually turning around on Greensheep. One of these decks will end up being the reason why Greensheep loses. He's lost 3 games with Aggro Shaman, and if he's able to sweep Pirate Warrior, then Pirate Warrior was the vulnerable deck. And that seems to be the big thing hanging over Greensheep's head right now. No matter what he's doing, this Aggro Shaman cannot get a win.
And I actually have been playing exactly card for card the version of Aggro Shaman that Greensheep brought to this tournament on ladder. And honestly, I found that it struggles a bit. I found that it isn't as consistently powerful against Pirate Warrior as Aggro Shaman was in the past. It does have those draws that are a little bit clunky in the middle of the game. And we've seen that come up and punish Greensheep here.
And we want to remind everybody who's tuning in a little bit late to the broadcast that we're about to begin the quarterfinals. After this match, we got some great things to look forward to. Here's the first one.
Welcome to paradise, the Bahamas. There's more tales to tell. It's Lovely Chuk. It's Stanodachi.
Yeah, Stanodachi versus Lovely Chuk should be a great match. I know a lot of Russian players are anxiously waiting for revenge as Pavel has fallen to another player, and I think China is also really anxious to get one of their players, one of their favorite players. Lovely Chuk's a well-known control-style player from China, and they also really want a berth in the World Championship.
It's actually been great to see how popular the Russian language stream has actually been throughout the weekend with so many Russian-speaking players doing very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that in a pandering way.
Hey, they're not listening to us. They're listening to that stream. So.
True. Greensheep is going to go once again to the Aggro Shaman, trying to see if he can get what is on paper a favorable matchup. But if he loses, well, then he lost 4 times with Aggro Shaman, and he is no longer in contention for the World Championship and in this tournament.
And SamuelTsao once again with patches in the opening hand, but now it's before the mulligan phase. So now he can send that back and have a much lower chance of having the worst card in his opening hand.
Oh man, imagine SamuelTsao draws patches 3 out of the 4 games of Pirate Warrior that he had played with it.
This right now, though, that hand would rather have patches in the opener than much of what he has. Though a Fireworks off the top makes it a lot better.
Maybe. I mean, there's Argent Squires onto the board, so it's a little bit awkward to deal with that. You know, one of the side benefits of not having those early pirates is that these Argent Squires are very resilient, and especially against early minions.
And yeah, SamuelTsao has kind of an awkward hand here. He does have the Fiery War Axe, but as you mentioned, does nothing against the Divine Shields, and Greensheep will be able to push a lot of damage very soon if he so desires. Also, just more importantly, Greensheep will be able to control the board. And if the Pirate Warrior deck isn't able to get in significant minion damage early on, it can be very difficult for it to ultimately win the game through its late game weapons and burst, especially through the taunts generated by the hero power with Stoneclaw Totem, and particularly the Feral Spirits.
This attack will tell a lot to Greensheep, what kind of hand he has. If he's holding onto his weapon, he's got a slow hand. Maybe he's going to try to upgrade some stuff. Maybe he's going to try to pirate combo me. If he attacks, fairly aggressive hand. Maybe have multiple layers of weapons that he needs to get through because it's telling him to attack a lot.
Yeah, no attack.
And it was also a hesitation of an attack, too. It was also like pause, think for a little bit, not attack.
And I think we're going to see the same thing from Greensheep. Jade Claw's coming down. Now what? Oh, no, he instantly no attacks.
Yeah, Aggro Shaman's much... it has a lot of burn, but they're definitely very centered around having the board control, especially when you have Flame Tongue Totem in the hand. Super important. SamuelTsao now can pull out the patches as a 2-2, but still not even that amazing right now, considering his opponent has Flame Tongue Totem as a follow-up.
It is strong being able to eliminate one of his opponent's minions here, potentially attacking to the Jade Golem, and have his patches survive. It's a pretty big deal. And yeah, it looks like that's exactly what he's going to choose to do. I believe he's going to hold his weapon as well. And, no, he's going to go ahead and take away one of the Divine Shields.
Wow. Interesting. It's playing around Flame Tongue Totems to a certain extent. Although he does lose the weapon charge, so... Yeah, he definitely might need that later on, considering the kind of minions that come out. Greensheep, of course, has pretty much the only play is Flame Tongue Totem or his hero power. And he's got to figure out how he wants to utilize his trades here.
I feel like we'll absolutely see Flame Tongue come down this turn. I think the debate is really, does he want to trade off his Divine Shield or his minion here? It seems to me like you want to trade off your Divine Shield. Maybe he just attacks the minion in and uses his Jade Claws to kill the captain, and then trades off and uses his hero power to potentially protect the Flame Tongue Totem from the War Axe that's already in play. But it seems like getting that attack with War Axe, or rather the attack with Totem both to the face. Oh, he's actually going to go with the hero power here. So wants to preserve that Flame Tongue for later.
Yeah, I think he sees value in that, and I think he's also really scared of his opponent's hand. His opponent missed turn 1, played Fire War Axe on turn 2, which is actually fairly common. If your opponent skips turn 1, Pirate Warrior does struggle with turn 2 plays outside of Bloodsail Raider. But, maybe he's holding Core Chrono Elite. Maybe he's holding some of these opportunities to really get super far ahead in tempo, and I need to be reactive. So by toteming, which, by the way, hits spell damage totem, very threatening on its own, he keeps his options open in case he needs to Jade Lightning, or maybe he Flame Tongue trades again.
Yeah, it also would have just allowed SamuelTsao to have a good target for the swing of his Fire War Axe, which he right now does not. So it allows Greensheep to control the tempo of the game, the pace of what's going on pretty immediately, and that's quite a powerful effect by itself.
Yeah, so say he Jade Lightnings, then he has Flame Tongue and Horse Rider, and then all of a sudden, guaranteed follow-up value.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I do like this this use of his resources by Greensheep.
I'm back in SamuelTsao's camp. Seems like Frothing Berserker is one of the more powerful cards, but again, you're worried about Jade Lightning. And this is kind of an interesting difference of philosophy. Pirate Warrior, do they acknowledge what you might have, or do they just kind of threaten you? A lot of times they just try to threaten you.
One of the key things here, too, though, is yes, you want to be aware of Jade Lightning. You don't want to feed into your opponent's best play. But if you play something weaker, your opponent could just play Flame Wreath Faceless, and then you could be in a lot of trouble.
True that. But then you're also putting them on Jade Lightning or Flame Wreath Faceless.
Right.
Damned if you do or don't.
Which is exactly what happens here. Greensheep has both, and SamuelTsao gets Jade Lightninged, and it will be a 4-mana 7/7 for another day.
But SamuelTsao does have some really powerful synergies together. Arcanite Reaper and Bloodsail Raider and South Sea Captain all kind of work off of each other. One's able to protect the other, one's able to get a lot of damage in. Of course, the weird cousin is N'Zoth's first mate. How do you weave that in? Because you don't have an upgrade right now to remove the Jade Golem very efficiently.
One interesting thing that happened here was SamuelTsao using his War Axe last turn to kill the Wrath of Air Totem.
Yeah,
that's
a good point.
Seemed like a pretty significant investment of resources when he didn't have another cheap weapon or a way to upgrade a small weapon here. Arcanite Reaper is his plan just to go face here, and yeah, he is. He is going face, but doesn't really have burn in his hand, so this is a little bit surprising to me.
It looks like his hand's telling him that he has to win through board, because weapon's going to be very far off from killing it.
Yeah, and this from Greensheep, I love it. I love the fact that he's like, okay, well, now I'm going to get a bunch of damage in the board immediately, and you don't have anything to contest this. You'll have to use an Arcanite Reaper swing to kill my Flame Tongue Totem here, or run the risk of taking so much damage.
Yeah, what ended up happening with SamuelTsao, I think, is because he saw Arcanite Reaper and he wanted to get swings out before turn 5 so that he can play it. But now he's stuck in a position where everything has just been uncomfortable, and I love the way Greensheep has kept his hand very flexible and dynamic. He's able to play removal and control. Now he's able to be very aggressive and can follow up with real punishes. He can remove through Jade Landing or just add more pressure with Family Faceless.
And it will have to be a, looks like, briefly debated swing before playing the Bloodcell Raider, but ultimately it will be the Raider first. Very scary.
Yeah. Build your own salty dog.
8-4 for 2, broken.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what happens if you're able to combine all this Pyre synergy together.
How do you get a Rend Black Hand for 2 mana? I'm so jealous.
Well, it doesn't kill a legendary minion. It just kills a legendary hero.
Yeah, it just attacks their face. They don't get to play it.
I guess so. Greensheep, again, he can start taking this a little bit slower. He's going to hero power because that's going to happen no matter what.
And hero powering in this matchup is actually quite strong because of the potency of Stoneclaw Totem. Because your opponent does rely quite often on individual big swings with weapons like the Arcanite Reaper. It does mean that you get a ton of overall value from that totem.
SamuelTsao is just drawing more weapon burn. I mean, that's 12 of the Fiery War Axe itself. That's 3 turns that you're letting your opponent just hit you. And so you're accepting 15 damage, and then you need to draw specific burn to follow up. And that's assuming your opponent doesn't get taunt totems or even additional minions on the board to kill you.
It's dangerous all-in attempt.
Yeah, so that's assuming you can even get it out over 3 turns of attacking the face.
But SamuelTsao's kind of painted into a corner here. He doesn't have good options.
Yeah, so the big problem, too, is he doesn't have any minion board, so it looks like his best chance is to just start going face and hope that you get the Mortal Strike, hope that you get a Leroy Jenkins, and really squeezing that damage. The time to go is now.
I'm sort of thinking back to that turn where SamuelTsao attacked with his War Axe, and then the next turn played the Reaper and went face. He had the opportunity to have the War Axe available and develop minions that turn that he played the Arcanite Reaper, and he decided to go face, and it seems like maybe that was premature.
He's playing board control tactics, really believing that he has good draws to outlast his opponent, but Greensheep's got some pretty good punish for this.
He's got some heavy hitters in his hand right here.
More than happy to see SamuelTsao not go face. It's very telling of what kind of hand he has. He says, yeah, he wants to play for minion control.
And no taunt totem.
I wonder if Greensheep even wants to place for Finley at this point.
I'm not sure he does.
Yeah. He wants to be able to get that taunt totem consistently every turn, and then you're in a position to power.
Actually going to go with Azure Drake over a Flame Wreath Faceless here, just maximizing mana usage. He trades his 2-1 for a 1-1, wants to prevent any pirate synergies from coming up here. Arcanite Reaper.
18 damage.
All right, I mean, if Greensheep does not find ways to block this damage, he hasn't been developing super quickly.
Even despite all of this rockiness of a path that we got to this point, Pirate Warrior still has the outs.
Yeah.
Just look at how strong he is, and that's why Greensheep, I think, drew, because he realized he probably wants to dig for Feral Spirits.
The single best card in his deck is Feral Spirits. That is not Feral Spirits. He could play a pair of 7/7s this turn.
Yes, and threaten to win the game.
And that represents lethal damage even through an armor up. SamuelTsao would still have Leroy for an out.
You're right. Leroy Jenkins isn't out here. And there's 18 cards. It's 1 out of 18.
And Greensheep here, he can go for 50-50 with his hero power and play an Aya. That does not represent lethal next turn. So there would still be another opportunity where he'd need to hit a 50-50 or draw Feral Spirits in order to be able to kill SamuelTsao the following turn. How big are the Jades? I believe they're 4/4 now?
Right, so it'd be 9 power summoned by Aya.
So he would still have outs. He'd have 14 damage on the board. SamuelTsao could go to 18. He'd have the ability to either get a spell power. He goes for the 2 Flame Wreath Faceless. If SamuelTsao draws Leroy this turn, he will win the game. That's not Leroy.
I was feeling it, Brian. I was like, oh my goodness, 1 out of 18. They're going to get it. It's like the Fireball with the Temple Mage. They always draw it. But it's going to come up short. Now, does this keep him alive? I don't think so.
If he is to hero power here, he goes to 17. That will get him killed by the Maelstrom Portal and the 1/1 totem attacking into his Dread Corsair. So this does not save SamuelTsao. It may look like it is a little bit of breathing room, but Greensheep definitely has the answer to punch through it.
What if he kills the Azure Drake?
If he attacks into a minion here, maybe. Maybe he buys himself a turn and can then... He has to fade a Taunt Totem. He has to fade Feral Spirits. He also has to just fade anything that straight up removes his Corsair here.
Yeah, but I think that's the only way to survive, killing the Azure Drake.
It's true that unless you kill the Azure Drake, you die to almost every card in your opponent's deck.
Oh, man, it's such a hard decision to make, too, and he's aiming for it. He's just kind of trying to see Dread Corsair to buy him time. That's a very impressive trade here from SamuelTsao. Most people just say, like...
The problem here is both totems beat him. Because Spell Power Totem allows Maelstrom Portal to punch through, and Taunt Totem stops his offense. But it will just be Lava Burst off the top. And Flame Wreath Faceless does, as Flame Wreath Faceless does, smash in the face, and we got a tied series going to Game 7.
One of these decks is going to have to fall here, and Pirate Warrior being potentially swept.
Yeah, which is the 0-4 deck? Is it Pirate Warrior or was it Aggro Shaman? What year is it?
Well, Aggro Shaman escaped barely, you know. It was
it's true.
Took
it's true.
4 games.
It was 0-2.
It was
03. Yeah, no. So it will be the first showing of the Jade Druid, rather.
Yeah. And that probably is the scariest matchup of all.
And that is the most stressed I think we've seen SamuelTsao. He just had his head in his hands. He does not want to go home on the back of his Pirate Warrior deck.
Yeah. Greensheep is only 1 game away from getting to the top 8, joining players like Doc Bone, who also punched his ticket to top 8. This is a shot of him after his victory, as he gave his girlfriend, who flew all the way out to the Bahamas to support him, very nice and well-deserved hug.
I mean,
and a kiss.
Clearly very happy to have beaten, not only made it his way to the quarterfinals, but beaten the world champion.
Going through the next match, I hope I can keep my calm and play good games against Terry.
Wow, we're really getting official here. We're having press conferences. We're having lights, cameras. We're in the Bahamas and Island Resort. Man, Hearthstone's grown up so fast, Brian.
I remember when we were mere.
That's right.
Murlocs.
I remember when
we've evolved.
I remember when we switched POVs every turn and flipped classes from
very
north and
glad
south.
that doesn't happen anymore.
Polarity switches were kind of hard to follow, and yeah, those were crazy times. But now here we are, all the way in the Bahamas for $250,000 and a spot in the top 8. Game number 7, it's all on the line. Winner moves on. Loser goes to the beach for what remains of little sunlight we have left of today. Otherwise, you're chilling in the hot tub with Firebad. Here we go. Game 7. Jade Druid is a tough matchup. It's really difficult to kill the Pirate Warrior fast enough before they kill you, but you do have some things to help you do it. You have those Ancients of War. The big thing that seems to be missing is that there's no Druid of the Claw in Greensheep's decks.
Yeah, he doesn't have that mid-range taunt here, so he's a little bit more vulnerable to the aggression of the Pirate Warrior than some versions we've seen. But he does have a pretty solid draw. He has the turn 1 Jade Idol to get his threats rolling. He has Wild Growth to ramp up into a Jade Spirit, but he is missing those crucial taunts.
I don't even necessarily think it's that important for Greensheep's draw to be very good. You have to kind of hope that SamuelTsao's draw is bad.
Yeah,
it's a combination of both because, yeah, Greensheep has good stuff. You know, he's got Wild Growth, but then his opponent just starts playing these crazy tempo plays with Pirates and getting an enormous amount of damage on the board.
Yeah, Greensheep needs to find one of those big taunts very, very soon because things are going to get really rough for him right away as this is a 5-attack minion and a Patches starting on turn 2.
Yeah, and the patch is important too because now SamuelTsao, reduces range of Living Roots to be able to snipe the Bloodsteel Raider. SamuelTsao's even contemplating if he wants to pivot a little bit and set up for, a more powerful weapon. But I think Bloodsteel Raider is almost as good as it gets.
Yeah, and looking at Greensheep's hand, he does have that ramp, which while the first Wild Growth is great, the second one is pretty much garbage. And Nourish in this matchup is not what you want.
But the good news is that he did ramp his Jade earlier, so Jade Spirit will at least be a little bit more competitive on the board. And Jade, Greensheep already feeling the stress.
Jade Blossom, not so hot.
More
doesn't keep him alive.
So, you know, what Jade Spirit does is, you know, forces your opponent to kind of attack into one of those minions, challenges the Bloodsail Raider, so that way if you draw a swipe, you can remove 2 minions, assuming that they play Frothing Berserker or something similar in stat line.
Well, there's Frothing Berserker, and it is going to get scary. Greensheep does not have any kind of way to punish this, any kind of remove it at all. He does not have a swipe, he does not have a Feral Rage, and SamuelTsao does have a 5-point attack to the face. So this board gets even scarier. Greensheep needs swipe right now. That's not it.
Okay, so what is his alternative here?
He can Feral Rage and punch the Berserker, and then perhaps Wild Growth. That does put him in range to draw an Ancient of War next turn.
Yeah.
If he picks up one of those big taunts, it could potentially keep him alive.
Yeah, I think I like that a lot better than any kind of Jade Blossom combination I'm looking at right now, because I think that Frothing Berserker is the biggest threat. You know your opponent can bump, it has another weapon charge, can bump into stuff, but right now things are looking like they're heavily in SamuelTsao's favor. I don't really see a winning line here from Greensheep based off his cards, but maybe he can draw off the top of his deck and get fortunate, because the problem is, even if he gets Ancient of War, his opponent will have so much development by then that it might not matter.
That's true. You know, it does have 10 health, but look at the damage in SamuelTsao's hand. He has Heroic Strike, he has Korokron Elite, he can upgrade, play a free Corsair, and that Bloodsail Raider, it's not going to die this turn. There's no swipe here, there's no Wrath here to follow up. It's just the Wild Growth. So there is still another 5-point damage swing from that Raider coming next turn.
Whoa, another Frothing Berserker. So now he has the availability to upgrade his weapon, play the free Dread Corsair.
Oh, this is just a monstrous board from SamuelTsao, able to develop 3 big minions, clear off Greensheep's only minion. Like you said, even if he draws Ancient this turn, it may just not be enough.
Yeah. So SamuelTsao hesitating to think if he wants to trade into the minion, and the only reason why would be to set up better against Swipe. I don't think you lose that much, but maybe he wants to just go for a 2-turn lethal.
You saw that your opponent did not have Swipe last turn. If Greensheep had Swipe, he would have cast Swipe. He would have killed both your minions. So even if he draws Swipe this turn, what's the worst case scenario? Yeah, SamuelTsao, he doesn't care about Swipe. He's going face.
Feral Rage number 2, and while that's card, it kind of helps the situation, doesn't solve it. And Greensheep in this position is stuck either drawing cards or hoping that his opponent doesn't have game-ending damage. You know, maybe I think at this point Greensheep has to draw 3 cards with Nourish and hope that it's Wrath, Innervate, Wrath, and double remove minions. But even then, he'd be staring at potential game-ending damage.
Yeah, that is honestly, I think just try and go for the absolute nuts Innervate, or rather Nourish, maybe his only hope. If you were to say Feral Rage for armor, attack into the Corsair here, at best, he ends up pumping the Frothing, and yeah, there's just so much damage waiting for SamuelTsao. He is nourishing.
For his tournament life, he needs to draw big, and those 2 dead draws and an Innervate, that is dead, and SamuelTsao will be moving on to the round of 8, as he's going to be able to punch for a ton of damage here.
Yeah, it may not be actually over this turn. He got 21 life, but there's almost no coming back from here from Greensheep. It is 7, 8, 9, 10, 14. He has 18 this turn. Not quite lethal.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. He's not dead yet. He's holding on. Apologies there. I got a little too excited.
Preemptive hype!
No, well, it's just I thought he was dead because Pirate Warrior had Korokron Elite and Heroic Strike. Wasn't paying attention to the mana crystals. So SamuelTsao getting really close still, though. I think the best way to set this up is still just to get your opponent low as possible with the max amount of damage. I wouldn't actually hate a Nog Crusader over Korokron Elite because you can get that damage onto the board and then Korokron and Heroic Strike the next turn.
Yeah, I mean, if you just send it all in now, what's the worst thing that happens to you next turn? Your opponent has already used both copies of Feral Rage. Even if they find a gigantic taunt minion, you have so much damage that can just punch through it, and they're so low in life.
There's not really much that SamuelTsao can do to go wrong. Even if he Heroic Strike the face, I don't even think that would be a situation where he could lose from this position. He's so far ahead, and Greensheep's going to hold on for dear life. Jade Idol number 2.
That's not it.
Is there a sequence of gadget sand draws that he can hit? Innervate off the Jade Idol.
Innervate into innervate into innervate into innervate into innervate into Yogg-Saron.
He doesn't even
That's
play
it.
Yogg-Saron. That's Doc
He also
Pone.
doesn't play 5 innervates, and it will be SamuelTsao who moves on to the quarterfinals, taking down Greensheep.
All right, so SamuelTsao representing Asia Pacific, sending home Greensheep, as he is the sole representative remaining for that region. And what a run by Greensheep, but he's going to have to try again next season to make it back to the World Championship.
Yeah.
All right, as looks like we're wrapping up that series. We have all of our 8 quarterfinalists, Brian. What do you think?
I think this is a great group. I think that we have a very strong representatives across all the regions. SamuelTsao coming through. He really did play quite well in the matches we saw him in throughout the course of the weekend, upsetting many players who are much better known than him.
All right, so as it stands, we have Stanudachi versus Lovely Chuk. That's coming up on stream right after this match. LVG versus SamuelTsao. Neria versus Frozen, and Teray versus Doc Pone. SamuelTsao is waiting with Rachel for a couple words on his win.
Thank you so much, Dan. Now, SamuelTsao, we watched the player cams, and poor Greensheep is holding his head in his hand. But you are cool as a cucumber. There is no expression on your face. What is going through your head?
在看着摄像机的时候，你的脸看起来很平静，但是你的内心是怎么样的？能不能简单说一下？
其实内心也没有说。 就是我心情还是算很平静的，因为我会想就是各种可能发生的状况，所以他不管做什么，应该都还好。
Actually, I was quite peaced because all in my mind is I'm calculating all the possibilities and I'm focusing on the match itself.
Well, I'm glad you were at peace, especially because you had some really rough opening hands, especially with Pirate Warrior. So talk to me about what you do to get yourself back in the game when you have a really, really tough hand opening up.
你的起手其实，在海盗战的时候是有些是非常不好的。那你是做了哪些调整，让你能够重新回到比赛之中呢？
有时候起手太急，那也是没有办法的。然后如果他如果给我一个很好的起手，然后我就小心打，然后不要打错，我就可以赢下这场胜利。
If I can get a good open hand, then I will take really very careful and calculate all the possibilities and do my best.
All right, well, we hope you get more good opening hands, no more patches in that mulligan. Congratulations, you're going to be moving on to the quarterfinals. We'll be right back with more from you, but now let's go back to the casters.
Thank you very much, Rachel. A series that kind of was really interesting to watch from a perspective. Aggro Shaman kept losing, Pirate Warrior kept losing, and then of course the most one-sided matchup possible in Pirate Warrior's arsenal, which is against Jade Druid. Very dominant performance, but that's what you've come to expect. The data backs up. The expert opinion say it's terrible. Really brutal for Greensheep, but I gotta say, SamuelTsao once again being able to make this Royal Road performance. It's his first big tournament he ever entered, and now he's in the top 8, one round away from going to the World Championship.
Yeah, and his group was thought to be an extremely difficult one. It was able to emerge as one of the representatives.